Okay, it is Tuesday, the 22nd of February at 5:30 p.m. And I call to order the Wenatchee School District regular board meeting. The first item is an executive session. The school board will now recess into executive session for a period of 20 minutes to discuss with legal counsel representing the district matters relating to district enforcement actions or litigation or potential litigation to which the district, the board, or a member acting in an official capacity is or is likely to become a party, when public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in adverse legal or financial consequence to the district. Pursuant to District Policy Number 1410 and RCW 42.30.110, this discussion will be closed to the public. The school board is not expected to take final action following the executive session.
We'll hold it in my office.
I am told we're good on the broadcast. So it being 6 o'clock, I ask everybody to please stand as we continue the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I welcome everyone to this board meeting and thank you for joining us. Les doy a todos una bienvenida a esta reunión de la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar. Gracias por su asistencia. The meeting is conducted in English, but we do have translation services so that citizen comment may be spoken in Spanish and be repeated in English. I will quickly describe this in Spanish. Si alguien quiere hacer su comentario de ciudadano o recibir explicaciones en español, tenemos disponible un servicio de traducción. Favor indicar su pedido a mí o comunicar vía mensaje electrónico. The next item is the consent agenda. Before I go there, are there any requests to modify the consent agenda from the board? Okay. The consent agenda includes the minutes from the workshop on the 7th of February and the regular meeting on the 8th, vouchers and payroll, the personnel report, the surplus report, contracts, field trips, policies for their second read, and the enrollment and financial report. Do I have a proposal for the consent agenda? Consent.
I motion that we approve the agenda as presented,
Thank
the
you.
consent agenda.
Thank you, Maria. Do we have a seconder?
I second.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. Laura. Oh, Laura said, sorry. Thank you, Laura. Will all those in favor please indicate by saying aye, and for confirmation, raise their hand.
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. I want to do a little education item on the consent agenda, and I hope that it'll be kind of uplifting for everybody. Today, as usual, we start, it's a very matter-of-fact way, and we approve the consent agenda quite briefly. But what is the significance of what has just happened? I want to sort of pay tribute to a classic song and a classic book and TV series by saying we signed off on keeping the wheels on the school bus. You're quite safe. Nobody's going to sing to you. Let's talk about what are in the vouchers. Student eat meals, so we approved food purchases. Schools need light and heat, so utilities, fuel for buses. The district needs and uses highly skilled specialist technical services, which we could not afford to provide on our own as a standalone basis. The North Central Washington Educational Services District acquires these skills and then provides them to us and other districts in contract packages. SkillSource is a partner for career-oriented students, and we borrow and we have bonds to pay for. Across the spectrum of work, loyal employees work for decades and then retire. At the other end, we hire new employees, many of whom will provide that same dedicated service. The personnel report approves the people who supply our extracurricular opportunities, mentoring and tutoring extensions. The contract section from our last meeting is what got me to do this and set me off. Partnerships and our dependency on them is central to the strategic plan. There were two grants funded by North Central Washington Community Foundation. One was Helping Hands for Youth at Orchard, which helps students, their families at Orchard Middle School work to alleviate the exceptional hurts caused by the pandemic. At Westside, a grant for pandemic-related academic, mental, emotional, and physical health of students was another one. Thank you, the Wenatchee community, for your generosity and philanthropy. And finally, a good place to find unique offerings of the Wenatchee School District and celebrate your students' outstanding successes is the field trip section. You'll find examples from technology, music, and many more activities. So we do that very quickly, but it's not unimportant. At this point, we move on to citizen comment. I believe we have two people. Stephanie Bradshaw is the first one. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Stephanie, you have 3 minutes and go ahead, time's yours.
Okay. Never before in the history of Washington has your job been so difficult. I extend my gratitude for your service. Since the National School Board Association has attempted to weaponize the FBI against concerned parents, I am unfortunately compelled to state this disclaimer. This letter and the enclosed documents are in no way meant to cause you to feel threatened in any way. I hope that you see these documents as an opportunity to receive support. Enclosed public disclosure requests have been served to all directors of the Wenatchee School District. Many districts across the state, including Seattle School District and several more through King County, will be or already have been served the same documents over the next 30 days by thousands of parents statewide who have come together as a unified voice. To ensure that this effort is recognized as a demonstration of support, the Chelan County Sheriff has also been given a copy of these documents and informed of our peaceful intent. We recognize that there is a fundamental conflict of interest between school government and parents. School government has a vested interest in the system as a whole, while parents have a vested interest in our children. We have identified that the source of this conflict may stem from the fact that our local school boards have been forced to give away increasingly more decision-making authority to the Washington State School Directors Association and other state agencies. The Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Rigdal, has clearly threatened to withhold taxpayer funds that rightfully belong to our school district based on whether or not we comply with health policies we may or may not agree with. Nowhere in the revised Code of Washington is power granted to Mr. Rigdal or OSPI to withhold or bribe the funds they are tasked to dispense to local districts. We, the people, founded this country with a structure that was designed to keep the greatest authority at the local level of government. Yet our governor and state agencies have made unilateral decisions for the whole population while ignoring the voices of local school boards and parents. Perhaps we lost sight of that original vision of strong local authority when we let the state and federal agencies like WASDA, OSPI, and the National School Board Association gain enough control. Is that my 3 minutes?
No, you don't want.
To withhold our state funding over matters that should be made personal choice for every citizen. All of us share the responsibility of getting ourselves into this dangerous predicament of a few people dictating to the masses. We also share the responsibility of getting ourselves out of this predicament. There is a solution and a path forward. The documents enclosed are our first act of helping you, our local school board, to take back your rightful authority to determine how best to represent the parents of this district. Please use these public disclosure requests as an opportunity to educate yourselves and us so we can better understand the entanglement we find ourselves in with OSPI, WASDA, and other state agencies who are overstepping their lawful boundaries.
Thank you, Stephanie, for coming in person to deliver your message. And Dawn, you're welcome to the podium.
Thank you, sir. So am I picking up right here according to, okay, thank you. Are we ready? According to RCW 28A345020, all Washington State school boards are required to be members of the WSSDA. Most other states do not have laws that compel membership. Their school boards still have the authority to choose whether or not they want to take guidance from the various state agencies, but not here in Washington. In RCW 28A343100, school board members are again compelled by law starting in 2022 to take governance training in cultural competency, diversity, equity, and inclusion standards. Those words are referring to critical race theory, sexual education for children as young as 5 years of age, and curriculums that promote transgenderism. These are just 2 examples of how our state legislature has taken away your authority to choose what you're taught and what you will be compelled to promote to our children. Representative Joel McIntyre attempted to introduce a bill in the current legislative session that proposed that local school board members in the WSSDA be optional rather than mandatory. Making membership optional would return decision-making authority back to the local level and send a clear message to WSSDA that we erroneously let power become too centralized. WSSDA has been treating Washington students and parents as if they belong to one large district rather than respecting the authority of the 295 elected school boards in the state. Unfortunately, Joel McIntyre was recently strong-armed into dropping this bill under pressure from the WSSDA. We, the parents of Washington, finally comprehend how little authority you have left to represent us. It is time that we come together to restore your authority and ours. In addition to providing the information requested in these documents, we ask that the Wenatchee School Board do all of the following. Number one, reach out to Representative Joel McIntyre to give him your support of the bill that proposed WSSDA membership be optional. Whether it's this year or next year, that bill must get passed for the future of our children. Number two, strongly urge WSSDA to withdraw membership from the NSBA. Currently, almost 20 other states have left the NSBA, and Washington parents are very disappointed to see that the WSSDA's silence on this matter. Number three, please pass a resolution acknowledging and affirming that parents are the primary stakeholders in their children's future. Several other districts in Washington have passed this resolution. As we finish the 21-22 school year, we envision a harmonious partnership between parents, school district leadership, and legislators to restore the freedom of personal choice over what our teachers and students wear on their faces and put in their bodies, as well as restore authority to the local level of government. However, if these freedoms are ignored by the Wenatchee School Board, we will take our children out of the public school system by the fall of 2022.
Can you wrap up?
Oh, I didn't
Take
know
a
what the
few more
beep,
seconds
how
to
many
wrap
beeps
up.
were. Oh, I've got like a quarter, half an inch. As you are well aware, over 55,000 children have been withdrawn from the Washington State public school system over this year. And that number will more than likely triple if mask mandates are upheld and a COVID vaccine is made a requirement of attendance. As a body of parents across Washington State, we have heard your collective plea for cooperation and help. You have been sincerely telling us that your hands are tied by the WSSDA and OSPI. We understand you now, and so together, please let's untie your hands and restore your authority to represent us, the parents of the Wenatchee School District. I'm sure I went over a little bit, so thank you.
You did, but that's okay. Thank you both for coming. I appreciate the citizen comments. The next item on the agenda is,
Can we bring these to you guys? These are the said documents.
You can give them right, yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes.
the next item is ASB reports, and I'm just looking around online. I think maybe that's Avery, but my eyes aren't very good, or is it Soraya? Avery.
It's Avery. Hello.
Welcome. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, my name is Avery Miller, and I'm the ASB president at Wenatchee High School. At WHS, we have recently wrapped up our week of Valentine's activities, which consisted of fundraising for different clubs and organizations through the sales of roses and Valentines, along with other activities such as photo booths and spirit dress-up days. Through February, our diversity team has also been working to increase student awareness of Black History Month. With spring coming, two of our biggest events, prom and the Janice France Talent Show, on the horizon, ASB is actively preparing for those. Unified basketball is also taking place this Thursday, February 24th. With springtime elections approaching, we are solidifying the things that have worked and also the items that we can improve upon for next year's upcoming group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to you and all your fellow students.
Thank you.
Welcome, Soraya. You have the podium.
Hello, my name is Soraya, and I am president of the Leadership Club at Westside High School, and I am here to tell you about what's been happening. So in Leadership Club news, we received our donation of 3,000 pairs of socks from Bombas, and with our partnership in the community, we so far have donated roughly 2,700 pairs. We just filled out our reorder form for this year, and we are hoping to be one of the groups selected to also receive t-shirts and underwear with our socks. We also just completed our Valentine's Day cookie fundraiser, which we estimated would bring us about $200, but surprisingly enough, we made $432 and baked and bagged and handed out over 200 cookies. As you know, every year we do our big dinner feed and silent auction. We are hoping to kick off soon and start preparing for it, but we could use some help. We are still looking for a recipient this year, so if anybody knows of a family with a child battling cancer who is in a financial need, please let us know. For Westside School News, the Senior Mentors Program, who meet twice monthly with community mentors who support seniors as they complete their high school and beyond plan, as well as help them make connections in the community. Board President Martin Barron, we thank you for being part of our mentor program. It's a rebuilding year after COVID. Huge thank you to Hillary Martinez at Wenatchee Valley College for her support and organization with this program. Tomorrow, Wenatchee Valley College will speak to our juniors and seniors about a few of their career technical programs: industrial technology, business computer technology, pharmacy tech, and early childhood education. Also, workforce grants will be at the school to help explain how they can help students pay for these programs. Thank you very much for allowing me to share about all the exciting things happening at our school.
Thank you very much, Soraya. Do any board members want to give any feedback or anything? Nope. Those cookies were, I think, an excellent project and you were working really hard. Thanks a lot. Special presentation will be the update on the equity program review. I'll turn it over to Paul first.
Yeah, well, tonight we have Education Northwest with us via Zoom. I will hand it over to Shannon Davidson. I'm seeing Mary, but I'm not seeing. Do I have both, Ron?
Hi, I'm here. Doesn't seem like I can turn my camera on though.
Okay, Ron, we'll see if he can.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Hi,
Ron,
everyone.
Presentation.
Yes, we are really excited to share our progress with the district-wide comprehensive equity program review. For those who may be new to this, the idea of our equity program review, and also just as a refresher for those of you who have been engaged with our process so far, we are working with the district as consultants to support a comprehensive review of practices, policies, preliminary data outcomes, perspectives from families, students, educators, and the community as they relate to equity and inclusion in the district. So we are hoping that through this equity program review, we can uncover opportunities to ensure that each student in the Wenatchee School District is able to succeed and achieve. So we are proceeding with our equity program review in 5 focus areas: curriculum, policies, materials, and resources; discipline policies, materials, and resources; instructional policies and teaching practices; hiring and recruitment policies and practices; and access to learning opportunities, which includes both access to grade level education and participation in highly capable and advanced programming. So those are an overview and a refresher of our 5 focus areas for the equity program review. And here is a reminder of where we are in our timeline. We are wrapping up February and heading into March, which is a really exciting turning point for us as we're moving into our kind of active collecting of data and stories phase. So I'll be able to give you a little bit more details about what we're looking forward to coming up in March. Oops. We wanted to share some of what we've done since the last time we met with you and gave an update to the board. A big deal, and one that was extremely impactful personally for me, and I think really impactful on our work and our ability to move forward with this as a collaborative process, was convening and meeting with the Equity Review Working Group, which we did for the first time on the 27th to finalize our plan. And we're going to be meeting again with them this week. We've also been continuing to gather documents, starting to gather data as well for our document review. We've got a data sharing agreement in process so that we can access student level data. We have been working hard on our communications tools. We now have a one-page informational handout in English and Spanish, which should be ready to share now. We were just waiting on the final approval of the translation. And we also have some opportunities for the community to suggest thoughts, concerns, questions, input on the process via a digital suggestion box. And I can put that link in the chat for everyone. That's up and running now. And Diana's team with the district communication office has also created a website that describes our equity review process that is, I believe, up and running and live now. One thing we've been really busy with in recent weeks is drafting our instruments. So these are going to be our surveys, our focus groups that we'll be doing with students, families, teachers, hopefully a listening session with the community. And we're drafting those up so that we can share them this week with our working group and get input to finalize those and get them ready. And we're very excited to announce that we've decided on our site visit dates. So we will be coming to Wenatchee on April 12th for 4 days, a sort of a subgroup of our team from Education Northwest. And we are working with the district and the working group to decide on a schedule for visiting schools, getting to know students during focus groups and families as well. And we hope it may also be an opportunity to meet you on the board. So I'm eager to hear some impressions of our first equity review working group meeting. Mary from our team is here and may have some insights and thoughts to share. And also would really love to hear from Maria and Julie, who are the board members who are represented in the equity working group. So any just initial kind of impressions, reactions to the process, kind of key takeaways for our work?
I can provide a little bit of the details of what happened at that meeting, which a good chunk of that meeting was actually spent on introductions, which I thought was fabulous. Everybody went in the group, identified themselves, the language they spoke, why they wanted to participate. And it was very, very eye-opening and a reminder as to why we're doing what we're doing. It was a good mix of, it's a good mix of people, students, parents, educators, Julie and I, and it was just a really welcoming space. I really appreciated that, the norms for the group were focusing on centering the voices of people of color, people in the LGBT community. So just, based on everybody's experiences, the background they're going to, that they bring to the group was very neat for me to be part of that group.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I think she hit it right. It was primarily introductions, but a good way to get to know people quite a bit closer in a community like that, or a committee like that, sorry. It was laying out a lot of the process for what will be coming. And so I'm looking forward, especially to the next meetings where it's really going to be kind of hitting the floor running on some of it substantively. I would like to see, and I know there was a survey kind of came out afterwards, how can we help make sure the voices in this committee are even heard? And I thought that was a good kind of checkup, because I would like to hear, from the students on the committee. I think they're probably a little more intimidated to speak in front of a group of adults. So it'll be nice to see as this progresses, the voices come out a little bit more, but it was primarily setting it up, getting to know each other. And I thought it was a really neat way to do that. So looking forward to Thursday.
Mary?
Oh, yeah, I would just add that, the working group is methodologically part of our approach as researchers and evaluators who employ culturally responsive and equitable approaches. So By design, this equity review is very much in partnership, and we're doing it together, and just really grateful for all of the energy and passion that all of the working group members have brought to the space. We know that our work is much more meaningful when it's contextualized to the local community, and it's really nice to have this group that represents current students, former students, parents, educators, and people were really open and vulnerable about not just their language background or their race and ethnicity, but also their class background. So I just feel like we're off to a very strong start with people being open and thoughtful. And we'll really get to work on Thursday because we have a ton of activities and we'll be in breakout groups. So there will be a lot more engagement and participation from all of the group members.
Great, thank you. Wanted to.
Do you want other board members to ask questions now, or we'll do that later?
We could do it either way. I have 2 more slides and then we could open it up for discussion.
That's fine.
Okay. This is just a quick check-in on how we're doing with our monthly deliverables. We were able to submit our review plan that was we had some input from the working group members on that, and they are invited to continue offering feedback on that. It's a Google Doc that working group members have access to, a commenting feature, so that as things come up, as the process evolves, there will still be an opportunity to revisit this and adapt our own plan as needed. We have the 1-page handout ready in English and Spanish, so that will be on track to turn in this week. And once we have a chance to incorporate all the input and feedback from the working group on the data collection instruments that we'll be looking at on Thursday, we'll be able to submit those as well. And these are our most immediate next steps. We're excited to meet with the group again on Thursday to review the instruments. And as Mary mentioned, we'll be working in small groups. So I think it will be a space where hopefully students and we're going to have a Spanish speaking only group. We're trying to create an atmosphere where people feel like they are most encouraged and welcome to participate. We're going to continue with our document review. We're taking good steps towards being able to access the student level data. And we'll, now that we have our communications tools, we'll be distributing those more widely, trying to raise more awareness of what we're doing and to have opportunities for feedback. And we'll start planning our trip. That's going to be really exciting to come up with an itinerary, make sure that we're meeting with representative groups and getting to know people up in Wenatchee. And we certainly welcome questions.
If nobody else, I have a quick couple of comments, actually. I was glad to hear how your committee group, you're trying to make people comfortable and open up. I think that's really, really critical. I was really glad to hear that. And, you know, as the other thing I wanted to do is thank Julie and Maria for their dedication in participating. I think we feel very strongly this is such an important project that we really needed 2 board members on that committee and the feedback so the whole board knows what's going on. And I want to thank you for that. And then as you move into your next phases, let's work to get the greatest possible, widest, deepest representation in what we all learn. So those are my cheerleader kind of comments, but also serious about, you know, make people comfortable so they actually tell you something.
Thank you for those comments.
Mary and Shannon, thank you so much. We look forward to Thursday evening for another really busy night. I know they're going to be looking at mainly survey information and reviewing that with the team. So those will be the documents and also the focus group type of questions as well. So it's going to be a really busy evening spent in small groups with different team members. But Shannon and Mary, thank you so much for the presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are two discussion items on the agenda. The first one is director districts, which I will turn over to Paul and to our distinguished legal counsel who's coming forward.
There's Danielle Marchand. Danielle's with us tonight as she has supported the previous board and now this board and the director district conversation. Danielle was going to give us an overview of the law and the process we're going through. Tonight, we also have from Samash Data, two different director district versions that we will also discuss, but I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. As Paul said, we're going to kind of tag team it. I'm going to give the overview of the law, and then Paul's going to give you an overview of the proposed districts. So, yeah. So we're going to give a high level overview. We're not going to get into the weeds on establishing voter districts. Is it coming? Okay. So the first step we're going to look at is we're going to look at the law of the district. And the law of the district is located in its policies and procedures. And the policy 1105 is the one that deals with voter districts. And if you notice, there is a section in this policy that has an affirmative action upon the board, which is that once it obtains the census data from the redistricting commission, it will prepare for the division of districts. So I'm not quite sure when the district received the census data. It was to be provided to the redistricting commission by the federal government in August of 2021. And then there's a statute that says that within 45 days of the redistricting commission receiving that data, it has to be provided to the local governments. But there is a time frame. That's why I'm talking about these dates here. There's a time frame that the board has to act, which is within 8 months after receipt of that data. So what we're going to be talking today is the voluntary process that's laid out in the Voter Rights Act that Washington State has adopted. And there's a prerequisite to that process, which is that the district must determine that the current system may be applied in a manner that impairs the ability of a protected class to have a say. And the key word I want to point out is may. It's not a shall, it's not it is happening, it's a may happen. Ooh. So the factors to consider when you're looking at that prerequisite are outlined in the statute and are stated here. Essentially, what you want to do is make sure that there's not a class of people where their votes are diluted. Right now, we're at an at-large system. So all 5 board members can reside in one neighborhood currently, and which would have the potential of diluting the votes of those other people in the other neighboring neighborhoods. So once you have made that prerequisite finding, then there's a 5-step process that the board has to go under. And that first step is to draft the plan. And that's the spot we're going to talk about a little bit more after I tag team it with Paul. But here's where it outlines the types of things that the plan must consider. These are also outlined in the procedure 1105 that the board has already previously adopted. The second step that the district must follow, once it has a plan that it has determined it would like to adopt, it has to give notice to the residents within the district. Because this is not just a plan of the board, it's the plan of the community. So they get to have their say in what the plan is going to look like. So after you give notice to the residents, then there's the public hearing, which is where the residents get to have their say. The fourth step that the district must do is that they have to then take action to adopt and approve that plan. That plan is adopted by a board resolution, and our office can assist with drafting that. Then the last thing that the board does is that they have to hold elections. So, and it's elections for all board members. So all board members would run at the same time. By statute, there's a time frame listed out in the statute. But when you break it down, if the board adopts the plan between now and November 2020, wait a second, between now and the end of this next year, all board members have to run in November 2023. So that's the high level overview that we're working under when we are looking at breaking up into voting districts. Is there any questions before I hand it off to Paul? Okay. Thank you.
All right, so Ron, if you would click on those next two, or the first one, the 3-district one. So we work with Mammoth Data, and they're working with the vast majority of school districts in the state, who are under the same, all the same rules that Danielle just reviewed. The idea here is to make sure that for our community, we are fairly close to a 50-50 district in for Latino, Hispanic, or non-Hispanic. So for Sammamish Data, what they needed to look at was how to create districts that could have at least one Hispanic district that was at least 51% or more, with the population being Hispanic. So we looked at 2 different ways of doing that. The first one, and it's harder to see up here, but the first look at it, this is through the colors. The larger yellow is the 3rd district. In between here, yeah, it's a light shade of, yeah, thank you, Ron. It's that yellow. And then you have the 1st district, or I apologize, the 1st district is the yellow, the 2nd district is the green, and the 3rd district is the tannish color. So those are the 3, when the Sammamish Data reviewed it, allowed for the District 1 would be 7,754 Hispanic versus 7,873 non-Hispanic, and Director District 1. Director District 2, 3,343 Hispanic, 12,316 non-Hispanic. Director District 3, 3,211 versus 12,412 for non-Hispanic. So there's one district, but it is still about a 49.5% Hispanic versus non-Hispanic. And then the other one, number 4, Ron, or the 4th district one. Yep. Thank you, sir. You do that. Oh, I spoke too soon. And do that same thing where you zoom in a little bit into the colors. That helped a lot. Thank you. So Director District 1 is yellow, 2 is green, 3 is the beige color, 4 is blue. So you'll see 2 districts in the center of the city where there's a higher population of people living. We don't have a huge population on either end. So that's why you see a greater land mass and not as many people living in that area. But the piece that we really had to look at from the number side of things is how the districts broke down. Again, we're looking for a 51%, at least in one district, where it's a majority Hispanic. District 1, it's 2,171 Hispanic, 9,560 non-Hispanic. District 2, 2,631 versus 9,109 non-Hispanic. Director District 3, 3,121 versus 8,610 non-Hispanic. And then Director District 4 is 6,393 versus 5,322 non-Hispanic. The other piece to this that was really important, it had to be a contiguous map. We've all heard of gerrymandering, and those it cannot have that. It cannot have just crazy little loops throughout the city and going all over the place. It had to be contiguous. It had to make some sense as to where the lines were drawn. We looked at it once. We were working with Sammamish Data, and he showed us how he could do it. And it literally was the definition of gerrymandering. It would just had to go all over the place, and it made no sense whatsoever. These were the best. These were the two options. And we really pushed them. Kim and I met with the Sammamish Data, Bob, 5 different times, 6 different times, just trying to make sure that we were getting the right information, the right data, working with Danielle to make sure, running them by her to see where we're at. She pushed back on a couple different pieces for us. We really feel like we're close with these two. So that from a high level, again, like Danielle did, that's what you're seeing in those two scenarios. Danielle, anything you'd add before we turn it over?
I just wanted to make sure that people understood when you're talking about 3 districts, that doesn't mean everybody comes. You only have 3 board members. That means 3 board members are elected or have to be assigned from those districts. 2 will be at large. So you still have a 5-member board. And in a 4-district plan, you have 4 people that have to be from that geographical designated area, and then 1 person would be at large. So you still have a 5-member board.
Board members, there's a lot of information we just threw at you. Any questions?
Couple questions. So this is primarily based on the census data, but does it also incorporate that Davis demographic data that we did
Yes.
Okay, because
Yeah,
I'm worried about the 450 housing development that's coming in that's not going to be reflected in the census yet.
We shared all that information with them as well.
Okay. And then take me back to the mays and the shalls in this plan, because it sounded a little bit more permissive than I remember, that if we do this by November, what if we don't? Or what are the requirements that we do this by November of this year?
There isn't a requirement, Julie. The requirement is that you look at the census data. That's the requirement. And then to prepare a plan for dividing into districts. So there's not a time frame, because it would be a voluntary and not a compulsory division. You can work at your own time frame. So.
However, if we don't develop a plan, then there are consequences to that. Is that correct?
There are consequences. One of the consequences that you could have a petition from a citizen who forces the plan through. And then you are at the mercy of that petitioner and the court system. And then there are certain timeframes that you must meet, which is maybe what you're referring to, Julie.
I know that they stagger the elections for board members so that you don't have an entirely brand new board. How is that going to work? We just have to deal with it if we have a brand new 5-person, all new board members.
So it would be part of your plan. So you would have all the board members run for election, and that's required by statute. That's non-negotiable. It's mandatory. But then as part of your plan, one district would be maybe going for 2 years. Then the next district would go for 4 years. So you would set up your staggering within your plan. But conceivably, you are correct. You could have a whole new 5-member board after the November 2023 election.
I'm just wondering if there was, given that a third of the population in Wenatchee is of Hispanic Latino identity, was there an attempt to look for two different districts with the 50% or maybe a little bit below that?
Yeah, and then that's where Danielle pushed us. We had 3 or 4 different versions of this, but they were it was really challenging to be able to find multiple scenarios with this. This was as close as we can come, and why the four director districts versus the three work better in that scenario to give it a much larger percentage. I think it was right around 61, a little over 61%. So the 4x1 actually supports the ability to have a larger population than any other. But we looked at a large number of them, and he kept pushing back, and we kept sharing it with Danielle, trying to go back and forth with what would meet our obligation.
Yeah, this has been a months-long process. So the first set of charts that I looked at, it was actually, there wasn't one full Hispanic, a majority district. And that's because I think they prioritized other factors above maybe ethnicity. So because there's a whole list of factors that you have to consider. And so the superintendent did push back, got some additional feedback and additional plans. And the plans that were just presented were the best plans to date, that at least that I have seen, that meet all the factors of the statute. I think the 4-person plan, 4 districts with 1 at large, meets more of the statutory factors than a 3-district plan with 2 at large, in my opinion.
I have 2 questions, actually, and I think you just answered the second one. In reading the procedure, they should coincide with existing recognized natural boundaries and will, to the extent possible, preserve existing communities of a related and mutual interest. This being a school district, I realize you're working with census data and ethnic data primarily, but to what extent did the boundaries for 3 middle schools and 7 elementary schools, how did they work with the 2 plans?
Initially, we looked at it, but there's just no way. He tried to do it by the school boundaries, but it just became, it was a non-negotiable for him to be able to achieve the greater outcomes that they needed to.
That's fair enough. In my,
the reality, and we all know this, the hard part is, people just don't move in perfect little batches all around each other, and to make it a non-contiguous or to make it a contiguous, it was incredibly challenging to use any other metrics between school boundary lines or anything else. To put one more lever in there made it literally impossible to do the work.
And then I think you answered my second question, is from a compliance point of view, having one district at 52 to 53% is significantly safer and better than 2 at less than 50 that might get to be more than 50. Is that correct? That's your legal opinion?
Yes. If I was going to go to court, I'd be much more comfortable defending the 4-district plan.
Sorry, I know that this is the law, as things often are with government. I'm wondering about the efficacy of this plan. Has it been successful in accomplishing the diversity of representation that you're aware of?
Yeah, so I haven't really looked at school boards specifically and the districting, but if you just look at our local community with what City of Wenatchee did and breaking up into voting districts, they have more Hispanic people on their board on their city council that have been elected than previous years.
Danielle, how long ago did the city do that? Do you remember? I'm sorry. No look pass.
It's pre-pandemic.
I'm going to make a comment that I do think that both plans, in a sense, tracked what I saw as a fairly successful effort by the city in accomplishing things smoothly, and I think with considerable community satisfaction.
Yes. Yeah.
Does the development of these districts take into account voter participation from those areas? Because what concerns me is we may have the perfect demographic in these districts, but if we don't get participation, we're going to have, I mean, this isn't the city council, this is the school board, and sometimes there's nobody runs for a spot. So are we going to have a vacant position 3 because there's just not enough interest in the area?
I think there's a 2-part question in that, Julie. One is, does it take into consideration voter participation? That is not one of the statutory factors. So the second issue that I saw in your question was, what happens if nobody decides to run? Well, then there's the vacancy statute, which you're well aware of, that will then go through an appointment process. And if nobody gets appointed, then the ESD steps in. So you're not going to have a vacant position for long, because if nobody runs, then the board can appoint.
Clarification, though, they can appoint from just that district though, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So another question. So if we discover after the fact that there's a fatal flaw in the plan that we adopted, are we stuck with it for the next decade until the next census comes out?
No, the statute allows you to look at redistricting at any point, but there are mandatory timeframes in which you have to look at redistricting. And one of those is the census data. So you can look at your plan and update it or revise it, but you have to go through those steps that we've outlined in the statute.
Okay, thank you.
If, Paul, do you have any?
Nope.
Well, thank you very much, Danielle, for coming and clarifying a difficult subject. Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
The next discussion item is the first read for a number of policies, and I will turn it over to the Paul and the policy committee representatives.
I'll take first crack, and then Catherine and Maria, please jump in. A number of these are exactly from the WASDA that needed to be adopted into our policies. New one is 4311, the accommodating students with seizure disorders of epilepsy, which is an essential policy. And really making sure it's very clear around students with the seizure disorders. Also provides liability protection for our school districts, the district employees, our parents, or the designated adult. The bill is intended to help school staff act promptly, knowledgeably, and appropriately with a liability protection. So there were, obviously they felt like, the legislators felt like that some staff members were maybe slow to react because of the liabilities that they may face if they were trying to do what was in the best interest of the young person that they were addressing. There were no changes to that policy from the committee. Ethical conduct for school directors. This is 1815. This is broad policy around the practices of the board, and then if those practices don't meet the agreed upon protocols and expectations for board, how does the board work through those as a collective group? There was a disagreement on that, and like we do with any policy committee, there's a disagreement with the 2 board members, comes to the full board for further conversation. So I will pause that here. That's 1815 and 1825 from the policy in the procedure. Maria, Catherine, on specifically probably 1825. Either one of you want to jump into this? And 1,000 series for policies are boards. It's around board work. So I will probably roll my chair back a little bit and allow the board to decide what they want with this policy.
Okay, just first and foremost, I requested that these policies be reviewed by our district legal counsel, and they were. We did make some changes to 1825, that kind of made it a little bit, just a little bit friendlier, I guess, for lack of better terms. But as you can imagine, I think these are great policies to have in the 1000 series. There was pretty broad discussion on why we need these policies, and we actually currently have policies in the in both the 5000 series and the 3000 series that hold staff accountable, like these policies hold the board accountable. And in the 3000 series, we have student accountability as well. So as the board who oversees the policies, including staff and students, I just feel it's why are we not holding ourselves to those standards that we're holding our staff and our students accountable by having such policy when we've already had policies for staff and students? It's, if needed, I know we are all adults, however, sometimes things happen, and it just provides accountability to ourselves, but also as a district. Again, if we have it for staff and students, why do we not have such policies for us as board members?
Well, and I would answer that with that we are elected and we're responsible to our electorate, not to each other. Students and staff are hired and students are attending our schools, and they have policies for that reason. But I think that we have our board norms that we're supposed to follow. And I think that we can be relied upon to follow those board norms. I feel really strongly that this is superfluous. We have board norms, and I think that this is just adding a new policy that's unnecessary. Again, we are not students in the district, and we're not employees of the district. We're hired and we answer to the electorate. We answer to the people. We answer to the people who elected us. And putting additional policies in place that allow a question of judgment. So my judgment can be questioned if I don't agree necessarily with a policy. One of the things that it says, therefore, in the event of a board member's willful and or continuing violation of law, policy, or judgment, who is determining whether my judgment is sound or not? If I am voting against something, or if I feel strongly against something, who gets to decide whether my judgment is sound? I think that we really put ourselves in a position to be accountable or answering to one another. And as board members, that's not how it's set up. You don't have to answer to me, and I don't have to answer to you as a board member. We answer to the people who elected us.
I think regarding the term judgment, I think you bring up a really good point. However, having been through several years of very great board turmoil, what I discovered is that when there is evidence that a board member has violated the law, Open Public Meetings Act being one primary one, that there is very limited or no recourse to hold board members accountable. I believe that a policy such as this or something similar is necessary. These are model policies, and the boards can have discussion about what terminology we want to be in the policy and what we do not. It's not a requirement that we adopt the wording as it is. And if judgment, because I agree with you, my judgment is different than your judgment is different than anybody else at this table. And we shouldn't be held accountable for our judgment because that's a personal thing. And we were elected in part because of that. But when there is a clear violation of something, there ought to be some recourse, because if somebody is in their first term, let's say, committing a violation of the law, which we have taken an oath to uphold, the only recourse is through a public process that is ineffective and doesn't deal out any consequences in the end. So I think we do need some kind of a policy. Whether this wording is appropriate, probably not. I think we should work on the wording and make something that fits our sensibilities.
And I'll just echo, I didn't see the value in a policy that adds what we are already sworn to uphold. I mean, to the extent, and I put out a comment, so I won't belabor it too much. But to the extent that this just mirrors what we're already required to follow under state law, I don't really have an interest in adopting something we're already required to follow. I'm fine with establishing a norm if we have concerns about a board member's activity, but keeping it less formal in a policy, because what I don't want to do is create a situation that imposes liability on a board member, because one of the bases for recall is violating your own policies. And so now if we have this policy, what if I don't want to follow this policy? Can somebody from the community or the procedure maybe associated with it? I don't want to sit down with so-and-so to discuss something. Can somebody say, well, you're not following your policy by not sitting down with so-and-so and talking about, especially if judgment was to be one of the criteria used. So I'm concerned about imposing liability on ourselves that isn't necessarily statutorily required. To the extent we've taken that oath, I think we're bound by the laws and statutes, and the only recourse against a board member really comes through that process. To the extent we want to regulate, have a means of regulating ourselves, I think it would need to be based on objective violations of law, not judgment, because I think we're in politically charged times right now where disagreements should not form the basis of calling somebody out as bad judgment. This, I know you took censure off. What I meant was censorship in my comment. Is this going to be used as somebody going, I don't like what she said, I don't like what he said, I don't like what, and just constantly in the principal's office because of things you don't like. And to me, that's too discretionary. Who's making those calls? Yes, if it's an objective violation of the law, that triggers the recourse that the electors can trigger. But I agree that's something that we should discuss. But that's also why we already have under the open meetings the ability to address a complaint against a board member or public official in an executive session, which is just duplicated in some of this process. So if we're talking about truly objectives, which is really the only thing I would support, I think we already have those mechanisms. If we want to write down a informal board norm, just so we know what the reporting structure is, I'm not opposed to that. I don't feel the need for a policy that says we're going to do and hold ourselves accountable for the things we already took an oath and swore to do.
I would like to have further discussion as board members then on what you feel those recourses are that are already in place, because I can tell you from experience, they were not effective.
And I guess, I'll push that back to you to say the only recourse a board member can have is to be removed by death, resignation, or recall or quarento. And I've been through them all with the agencies I work with. And yeah, recall and quarento, you're almost never going to get. But we as a board member can't vote somebody off. And so if that's the intended recourse, that just can't happen. We can't say it's up to the public to remove a board member. So all we can do is talk about the problem and I guess remove people from committees or something. But again, we can talk about the problem based on the ability to have an executive session to discuss a complaint, or through other less formal means if somebody's and censorship is allowed. And we could decide just randomly without having a step-by-step procedure to censure somebody who is violating it, but it still doesn't mean that they're removed from the board. So I guess I don't understand what recourse you think we need to have, because we're limited by statute and what we can do.
Just to clarify, these are policies, not procedures, both of them.
18.
Both. They're both policies.
Yes.
Maybe I'll put in my own words here. We do have operating principles and we do have board norms that you can correct me, Laura, I think they're about 2 years old, right? That they were rewritten as a result of some of the problems that you described.
Yes, but every board should adopt their own board norms.
Right. So, I find them fairly informal and loose, which in a way is a good thing because as a board, we're trying to be collegial. So that's the one thought. The other thought I have is codes of conduct are expectations of people who hold public authority or who work with children and people that we function underneath the board do have obligations. I find it a little difficult to say we don't have to have the same obligations. I looked at policy 1815, and I'm not an attorney or an expert or a detailed bureaucrat, kind of see where they were, because I personally do not find them objectionable in any way. A number of them are backed up in code, and I think Laura is right. Sometimes it's very difficult when you have somebody who the code can be very slow and a person can be very strongly opinionated. I did find that nowhere did I find the stewardship one covered in a combination of code and our norms. That's what I see as our fiduciary responsibilities. So I think whoever wrote this did pick up on a couple of things that are a gap. So that was kind of where I was. I personally did not like censure. I think censure is not a good action. It actually makes conflict worse, I think, and it probably doesn't accomplish anything. If we had a recall, as Julie talks about, in a serious situation, or if we had an actual follow-up and prosecution of a breach of the law, that's appropriate. In terms of policy 1825, I know that was rewritten from the model policy, and I know judgment is a squishy word, but if we're trying to be a collegiate team that has different opinions but behaves civilly with each other and works together, the first thing that happens I just want to read something, by the way, this is important. The 9th of our board operating principles. The board speaks with one voice. Directors who are in the minority agree to support board decisions when action is taken. So we debate, we allow listening, we make a decision. I may not agree with the decision, but once that decision has been made collectively, I am responsible as a board member to make that decision and that operation work as best as I can. And I think that's an important foundation stone for any board. So we can disagree, we can debate, we can discuss, and then at the end we reach that point. Now let's get back to the aspect of these two policies. If one board member, let's say, is not adhering to something they disagree with and attempting to undo a board position, that you could perhaps call not good judgment. The first step is simply to talk to that board member privately with any board member discreetly and listen. That could be a message back to the board, we understand, and we change. It's discretionary. The second item would be that if we can't work collegially, and I hope that 99.9% of our differences can be resolved in that way, we then can have an executive session with the full board where the aggrieved board member can talk to the rest of the board. Then we also talk about working together to do training. The ultimate, which is only to consider, would be that if a board member is acting contrary to the board norms, then it's possible that that board member could not fulfill their board appointed, not their elected appointed. They are elected and retain that power forevermore until the voters take it away. That should not be touched. That's one of the reasons why I don't approve of censure. But I do think that this policy is an imposition that I personally am very comfortable placing it on me. And then I'd like to allow, this is a really important issue, and I know we've got differences around the table, let other board members speak a bit more, and then we'll decide where to go through from here.
I guess I'll, not to add on, but Laura, you mentioned not having recourse. As I'm rereading policy 25, which I thought was more of a procedure, I still don't see recourse necessarily. It's just a talking point, which to me felt like the natural, what we do anyway. So again, to me, it didn't feel necessary. I think I was a little frustrated, to be honest, in using this time to discuss it, because it sent a bad message that for some reason we're presuming we're not going to be able to get along or to carry out our duties to the best of our abilities. And so to me, in some ways, the messaging of this was poor timing maybe. But again, it didn't feel like it adds anything. I think all the duties that it's pointed to above, we've already taken an oath. It just consolidates them all, but it's the oath that we're bound to follow anyway. And so to the extent we want any kind of recourse, this doesn't seem to add a whole lot. And to me, it's just sort of in this process, a distraction from talking about our students and their learning and what they're going through right now. So, but, if we are going to entertain this, I think we absolutely need to remove the lapses in good judgment and have that to be something more objective, to where it's an objective violation of law. We know that an open meeting violation is an objective violation of law. And, Martin, I think we all agree that when the board speaks on something, the board speaks and we uphold that position and we follow that. But I don't want to be misconstrued that when things change and we want to revisit something, suddenly that becomes a bad board behavior. We did that, I did that with the COVID situation last year. Things changed when we opened schools. I said, can we revisit this at another point? I didn't feel like it was inappropriate or being a bad board member. I thought it was, there were good circumstances to do that. So when we're talking in that context, I guess I started as just the
If I can
question
just
to
put a
Laura
quick
is,
interjection there. At that point, I think the appropriate procedure is any board member can request an item to be put on the agenda, and that would be a way that you would review something.
and just making sure I wasn't taking it too literally then,
Yeah.
what you were suggesting.
I
So
guess I'll clarify, what I meant by no recourse. And you're right that this doesn't have, teeth and it's not punitive, but I think it's okay to, consider removing board appointed positions on committees and so on. What I like about 1825 is that at least there is a process in place, because I did feel that was one thing that was missing, that complaints were made, and it falls on the board chair's discretion, and to have a procedure in place, not a procedure, but a policy in place that involves step-by-step process, I think has some value. And you're right, it doesn't have teeth in it, because we're not going to remove an elected official. That's up to the folks who elected us to do that. But if there is a clear violation, and the board sometimes are the people that are most likely to be intimately aware of what's going on, and it's nice to have a step-by-step process of addressing it.
I guess one of the questions I had then is the expectation then that this becomes a reporting requirement. If I see something, do I have to report so-and-so, or do I have to? I kind of outlined just the slippery slope I saw as making it this formal. Like I said, I don't have any particular problem saying if we know from past experience that we don't always know how to address these, just making it part of our board norms that, hey, if so-and-so board member has a issue with another board member, take it to the chair and we'll discuss and figure out how to deal with it. It's the formality of the policy that I kind of go, do we really need this? We took an oath. It doesn't really add a whole lot. Just another thing to pad the policy manual.
And I agree with that. I think your first question that you put to us in your email, Julie. How does this promote or relate to the academic improvement of our students? I feel like it, for lack of a better, this is fluff. It's one more thing, one more policy to adopt that's unnecessary. And like you said, it doesn't have any teeth. It doesn't. So it's kind of like, I feel like it's just unnecessary. And it says, we'll be nice to each other and we'll have good manners. I'm sorry for my simplification of it, but that's what I feel that it is. And I just think it's unnecessary. We go through 5-6 policies every 2 weeks, new policies to add, and this just doesn't seem to add anything of beneficial, in my opinion.
Well, I'm gonna have to disagree on that. I think, so the policy, neither Catherine nor I sit here and say, oh, we're gonna we're gonna present these policies. These are presented, I don't know how they're chosen, but in regards to the timing, we just had a work session with Trisha Lubach from WASDA. So I saw it a little bit differently than you did, Julie. I thought, well, makes sense. We just had a training in regards to the roles of the school board. We're a fairly new board. Just, I guess, my role on the policy committee is that I invest quite a bit of time reviewing policies and showing up to meetings. And as one of the main responsibilities of the board is to review and approve policy. So, and as we know, not all policies are related to tied to students and academics. So I'm not sure why this is any different than the other ones that we approved or reviewed that are not related to student and academics.
So I'd like to address that comment because you're right. We do need to spend the majority of our time and effort focusing on student learning. It's the mission of the school district and it's what we should be doing. And I think if you look back historically within the last 4 years, what you found was that board behavior became a side-ring circus for the district, and it distracted from the board's focus and ability to do our job, to be mission-centered. And so if we do not have a process of, preventing that from happening again, or, at least curbing it in a little bit, then, board behavior can become a distraction. And we have seen that in the past.
I think that is a very good clarification of yours, Laura. I've been thinking a little bit about where we go from here. We could return it for rewording, which might not be very helpful. I do want to make a comment that our behavior and our efficiency directly improves education. We can behave well and appropriately and do things that help. We can use our time well. And I think that is a good use of our time. And I think that we speak from experience. At this point, I think, given that, I would like to open this up to see if somebody proposes this moves to a second reading. And that would permit somebody to make an amendment or to push it back for rework. Because I don't think we have a consensus on this one.
Does it require a motion?
Well,
More
Actually, I'm
importantly,
looking
just
for a
what do you
sergeant at
want me
arms.
to do with it? Do you want me to?
I think we have to have an indication to given an instruction. I don't know whether motion is the right word. I'd look at a sergeant at arms to tell me what to do.
Yeah, I literally just need direction from the board, consensus from the board as to what you want this moving forward. The second read, does it need to have additional rework? So that's what I would need to bring it forward or not.
Well, we have a policy committee, so I would propose that we send it back to the policy committee and, have our 2 board members and staff review it and see if there can be some consensus about changes to the policies that might be more agreeable to the board as a whole.
We can do that.
My only concern is that we've already been there, and there wasn't a consensus in regards to that. So that's why we're having this lengthy discussion. I'm with Martin. I don't have a problem with these policies being imposed on the work that I do. I would actually like to see it move forward to a second read.
I think since we aren't settled, I would like to take the little bit of extra time and go back to the policy committee, even if it's brief and it comes back and then we don't share an opinion and we have to make a decision. But I would like to give an opportunity for that to be an improved pathway to that point. So if the policy committee can take another look at it, they've listened to us, and then see whether there's something that we can all work with better. I think we've all said what we thought. There may be some add-ons. Okay.
Other board members agree with that? Just need a little consensus. Maybe
Sure.
consensus.
Sure. Yeah, I think what was disturbing too is the examples that they used, or the one and only example that they used when they presented this. And again, this came from WASDA also, Kim, or?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
it did come from WASDA. Yeah, the one and only example they used as a board member violating policy or using poor judgment, and it's under the using poor judgment category, I think, was not wearing a mask. And, you know, at some point, and I found that kind of alarming initially, that was the only thing they could come up with, that was a problem. And it seems very specific. And so it makes the entire two policies very questionable, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I have 3 board members who would like to push it back to the committee for one more round. So that's what we'll do. We'll bring it back to policy committee for another conversation. Then moving on to 2161 and 3246, both so special education and related services. Again, really following the October 15, 2021 proportionment rules, and making sure that we're fully in compliance with their inclusionary practices, the family engagement, the effective support for students receiving special education services. We also ran this by our special ed director, Tricia Craig, and she was comfortable with it as well. The second policy there is 3246, is restraint, isolation, and other use of reasonable force. Again, really made sure that we reviewed that with our special ed director, and we're in compliance with all of these current House bills and other WACs that are responsible for these. So there were no changes by policy committee on either of these. And then the last one is 5410, discretionary holidays. Again, just outlining the different holidays. They've added Juneteenth, which is outside of our school calendar year. So it would impact those staff who are pretty much year-round staff members. So I don't know if there was any other comments on those.
Yeah, what happened?
Oh, geez. Thank you. And naming the schools. This is a House Bill 1356, which prohibits the inappropriate use of Native American mascots in public schools without proper tribal consultation. Thank you.
I had a question on the Juneteenth.
Yes.
Is that going to be a recognized holiday in terms of paying overtime if you work on it, or staff then have to trade another holiday for it? How is it being implemented if adopted or recognized?
So that would be a recognized holiday for staff. That would be, if you're in that category, that would be paid holiday. Does that make sense?
It does, but it doesn't have to be. So I'm just wondering if that was a conscious decision to make as part of this policy also, that this is the paid time and a half,
Mhm.
and we're not
If you work
requiring
on
it
it.
to be a trade with another one potentially. Because you can recognize the holiday, you just don't necessarily have to pay for the holiday. So that's where I was trying. Your response was just, oh, it'll be a financial
It is.
issue. So I kind of want to know what the financial issue is.
Isn't that a contract issue? Are we going to have to revise contracts next go around to address that?
Yeah, it would have to be within that context of the contract that you would have to have those conversations about. Is that a work day? There are some, not every day is a non-work day for those holidays. As you said, it couldn't be just a recognized holiday. But yeah, that would be a piece that we would have further conversations between Kelly and the different groups.
So for example, if we've named in our contracts, I don't know how they're worded, if we've named 10 paid holidays or something like that, and now we have 11. So that will impact us financially.
If we call it, if we use it as you are working or non-working.
But like you
holiday.
said, it's outside of the regular school year, so the impact is going to be limited.
Very limited.
Okay.
Very limited.
Thank you.
So those are the policies. We'll move forward. All of the ones except for 1825 and 1815. We'll move the other ones forward for second read.
Agree.
Okay.
Board communication. Look left first and go around the table.
I don't really have anything today. I'll update on the legislative happenings next week.
On that note, I was contacted by Tim Garshoff last week. He's the executive director for the WASDA board, and he asked if I was interested in being the WASDA Legislative Committee representative for District Area 7, and the WASDA board approved the appointment. So I am the District Area 7 Legislative Committee. Currently, we are meeting once a week. We are in full swing of the legislative session. And there are some really good bills out there. So I'm just going to give you kind of a heads up. We only have one bill with Hawkins out with his name on it. And I'm not sure where it's going, but it doesn't really impact us as a district. But if we need people to testify at the hearings, I might be reaching out for support with those. But one of the big ones is the enrollment stabilization, the budget stability, which is currently in the House. And it's basically due to the decrease in state enrollment due to the pandemic. And so they're looking for to stabilize some of the funding, and so that we can keep some of the programs up and running. As you guys know, we can't use ESSER funds you can't use temporary dollars to staff fund. So that's a pretty big one. They were actually testifying on that today at 4:00. And then another big one is the student support staffing that would increase funding so we can get more counseling nurses, increase the ratios of staff in our building. And again, that one also was being testified on today at 4:00. So more to come.
Thanks, Maria. And it's good to have us having representation on a regional group. So thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Yeah.
I do not have anything to add.
I think you've heard enough of me for today. So let's move on to the superintendent's report.
Mine will be brief. Again, did we? Are you sure? You threw me because I'm quite kind of off now. Just really proud of the work that our schools are doing throughout. The board had a really great presentation put on by our learning teaching team, headed by Mike Lane, around our professional learning communities. But seeing them in action, and our board are actually going to be able to be out in this week and next week, I think, are the scheduled dates for our board. So our board members will be seeing the actual work of our educators, talking through the data, talking through the instructional practices. I'm just really pleased that our schools have opened that up and an opportunity to really see it in action, because it's one thing to be in here and talking about it and seeing different videos, but to actually live it with our staff, our teachers, our principals. Super excited about that. But some of the work that's coming out of our professional learning communities right now are just fantastic. Mike and I, a week or so ago, were up at Pioneer Middle School and really just being engaged in the conversations around student learning, and then how to continue to expand student learning, how to support our students who may be struggling, and this team just literally coming together and knowing the students. I was at another school, Foothills Middle School, where the team, it was just an amazing opportunity to really see our staff knowing our students, knowing their strengths, their challenges, those opportunities for them, and digging deep in and trying to figure out what are those next steps. So I'm just really pleased that our board will be out seeing this work in person. So I'm just very grateful for our educators and our staff members throughout this incredible district.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you, everybody who has sat with us through here. We now move on to an executive session. The school board will now recess into executive session for a period of 60 minutes to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a staff member. Pursuant to District Policy Number 1410 and RCW 423110, this discussion will be closed to the public. The school board is not expected to take final action following the executive session. Thank you.
So I just want to make a note that those packets are being delivered to the board as we speak right now.
The school board is extending the executive session for a period of 20 minutes. Having completed the executive session, the board meeting is now adjourned.